So I want to start with something that John Huston famously said, which was, I don't know why they spend so much time remaking the good movies when there are so many bad ones that can be made better.
What a place to start.
So I'm just wondering, is there something perhaps to his theory you might agree with?
I mean, I would start by saying we saw Head Over Heels together in New York on Broadway and had a great time and really fell in love with the joy of it and kind of the size of that music for Broadway and kind of the way that the Go-Go's music had been integrated. And so when the Playhouse approached us about imagining this in a different form as a party, people on the floor, everyone dancing to the beat, it felt like a question of, can we take what we loved about the experience we had and make it, I don't know, amplified even more. So it was less about like, how do you redo something, and more about how we take what we love and make those things even louder in real life. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would totally agree with it. Yeah, I mean, we also, I think when we saw Head Over Heels and had a blast, we never thought we would ever work on it.
No.
And there's things, and also I would say like the way that it was presented on Broadway, which was very much as like a proscenium musical with 2 acts, and was like not necessarily how either of us work, right? So it felt sort of like far away from us and just something for us to enjoy. And so it feels less like a reaction. It's what you said, like less like a reaction to a thing and more like, oh, this is a completely different path for the material.
Right. Well, from what I can understand, you've truncated the show. It's 1 act, it's 90 minutes, give or take. So clearly there were changes that were made structurally to get to that length. So what were your priorities in maintaining this atmosphere that you've just described and still being faithful to the tone of the show?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that was guiding that time and length, especially, was just how long do people want to stand and have a great time before you get too tired and it starts to feel like, is there a break? Can I sit down? Where's my chair? So this kind of 80 to 90 minute length guided the partiness of it. If you have 100 people standing, how long can that maintain? And then how do you, as you said, carry this story through that, both through the scenes, but also where are there storytelling elements that we can add to songs or transitions so that the story stays tracked, even though it's been shortened?
Well, I have to tell you, as somebody who's seen Bruce Springsteen 81 times in concert, I've stood through almost 4-hour concerts. It seems like we're just getting warmed up at that point.
The Boss is an exception. The Boss might be one of the few exceptions of standing 3 hours.
Exactly. I'm wondering from your perspective, I went back and looked at, the New York Times reviewed this show twice. Once in 2015, where Charles Isherwood called it a funny and frolicsome concoction. And then by the time it opened in New York, Ben Brantley called it timid and awkward as the new kid on the first day of school. Wow. As people who are creators, what do you think goes on, or if you know in this particular case, what did go on with a show that could be funny and frolicsome and somehow by the time it makes it to New York, timid and awkward?
I mean, I think we haven't really invested much energy into the crystal ball of how Head Over Heels got to where we are. We started working on it at Pasadena Playhouse, and I know that there was a long road that we had nothing to do with. So I'll say from, and also I didn't know about those reviews. Did you?
No.
We're hearing those. We're hearing those quotes for the first time. So I mean, I can't speak to Head Over Heels. I think we're taking what we got at face value. But I think both of us have been in, have made other shows that have kind of snowballed in various ways where, you get to the final version and you're like, oh, actually, maybe that was the thing that was closer. So I have like a ton of empathy for everyone who put their hands on this thing. And I don't actually, I know it didn't run for a long time, but as Jenny said, we had a great time when we saw it. And, you know, that's like making new musicals is really hard and really ugly. And it feels like a gift that we are coming at this with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of things happened that we have nothing to do with. And it doesn't feel like we're in the trenches with a new musical. It feels like we get to make this awesome show.
Right.
Which I think, having both made lots of new musicals, I sleep better at night in this version. Do you agree?
Yes. Yes.
All right, if you sleep better in this version, is this a safer playground for you? I mean, sort of reinventing something as opposed to being in the trenches with something new? I mean, is there the same level of excitement as well?
I mean, for me, it's very much the same level of excitement, and it is. I think it's just a matter of like who you're running to on breaks, asking questions. Like, I don't feel like the processes are all that different. I think we've both been very lucky to mostly do work that, even if it isn't explicitly new work, it feels in some way like new work. And so, like, in this process, there aren't writers in the room, but also what we're doing is somewhere in between many titles. And so I feel like we're having the process of making something new, even if the script and the show is kind of a given circumstance. Would you agree?
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
Well, I would assume that it doesn't hurt to have one of the original cast members as part of the company here. And I'm wondering if Yorel is, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but I'm wondering if his experience with what you enjoyed so much in New York is proving to be helpful in what you're creating here.
I mean, I think the thing, as Sam said so beautifully, is the gift of approaching something as a new work, the ability as adapters to be approaching it as though it had been done 75 years ago. And we have the amazing job of being able to pull pieces of what we love and maintain the story that it is. It feels like while it has the same spirit, a very different, shall I say, take on the show. So I think what we love about Yorel is what an incredible performer he is. And it's less about what did you do in the last one at all. That's not the vibe is like, if we were all approaching this as though it were Death of a Salesman and approaching it now in this moment of 2021, what is the story that we're all telling as we come back together? Which I think is how we've approached this, from looking at it with the Playhouse as an invitation back. Welcome home, welcome back. What does it mean to be gathering again in person? And can this in some way mark that? It's not the same world as it was when Brantley and Isherwood reviewed this. It's just not.
Yeah.
We're not the same people at all. And theater is not the same either.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I went back and watched Stars in the House, because they had a Head Over Heels reunion.
Oh, fine.
And on that, Peppermint said that if you're looking at this show through the lens of a post-2020 world, it probably would have performed a lot better than it did. How do you think this show resonates now that is different, perhaps, as Peppermint said, than what it did back when the show first got its start? How has society caught up to this show?
I mean, I think one of the things that excites me the most about it right now is that the show is such a warm invitation to audience members, that it has a big beating heart. It's actually not snarky. It is completely exuberant. The Go-Go's music is utterly exuberant. It is unself-conscious. It's just like big open-chested joy. And that is embedded in the music. And I feel it even more, frankly, doing it in LA. Like the resonance of the Go-Go's in LA is undeniable. It feels like Los Angeles, the music does. And so as we're thinking about it a little more like a party, if as we're thinking about the music as the beating heart of the experience, and we're thinking about it as a welcome back, and not just a welcome back to people who love Pasadena Playhouse, but a welcome back to people who love the Go-Go's, a welcome back to people who just happen to be walking down the street, a welcome back to people who would never expect to come into a theater. And I don't think that that's something that we're imposing on the show. I actually think that's the heartbeat of the show. I think there's a queerness and an openness and a curiosity. You know, the show is about it's the story of people who go on a journey to discover that everything they needed, they had the whole time. And I feel moved by that. And if we can create an invitation that says, hey, we're glad you're here. And also you're enough and you're enough and you're enough. That's in the dramaturgy of the show. And I think the question that we're asking here is like, can that also be the experience? And coming out of what we're still coming out of, I really need that. And I think many people do.
Well, clearly, if you look at some of the videos that were done and a lot of the fan comics that came out from the show in New York, it was about how people could see themselves on stage.
Right.
At a time when they didn't see themselves on stage.
Right.
So I guess my point in asking that question is, since people can see themselves more openly in the years since the show started, not necessarily exclusively on stage, but in film and on television, is this party that you're throwing going to be ultimately the ultimate inclusionary party?
I mean, I think that's the hope. That's the thing that's, as Sam said, driving the heartbeat of what I think we're all wanting to make. And with the performers that we have gathered, that feels very much like a shared mission. Like, yes, we're doing a show, we're doing it in the midst of a crazy moment in time. And if all of us are coming to this with the spirit of an open invitation that really is for everyone, how does that desire and that intention go through an entire production? Which, as Sam said, is also the heartbeat of the show. So it's hard to speak on like what it was then because we weren't involved in that production, but it very much is what we are making or attempting to make.
And I think we have a real hope. I mean, in terms of seeing yourself, it's like, that means a million things, right? And in our cast, it means age, it means bodies, it means experience. We have a cast, it's only a cast of 8, but they come from very different worlds. It's not just musical theater performers. So we're stretching in a lot of different directions, and that was very much by design. And I think we have the same hope for the audience, right? That like, that's something that's reflected too. It's like somebody who goes to the theater no matter what, next to somebody who just walked in.
Right. And that both are welcome. Both are welcome.
It doesn't favor one over the other.
Right.
And it works the same way in the show, I think.
Right.
Well, I think the casting is really interesting by having people who are seasoned, theater performers next to people who are better known for other lines of work, albeit in entertainment. I assume that was intentional.
Yes.
Was there one thing that's also been interesting about the history of the show is that, Jenny, you're the first woman to be involved in any serious way in creation of it. It was written.
Thanks.
It was all written by men. It was all previously directed by men. It was choreographed for men. So,
wow. This is recorded. Glad this is recorded because that is a face. Those are 2 faces of shock.
Craig, you're really dropping some pieces of news in this interview that are, I think we've been so busy working on this show that we didn't know some of this.
Well, I didn't want to have an interview where I just said, so what's your favorite Go-Go song?
Oh, we appreciate it.
This is great.
That's bananas, though.
Yes, it is truly.
But that is so female empowerment centered, for the first female to have a voice in how this story gets told.
For the Go-Go's.
The Go-Go.
For the Go-Go's musical. I just said that's crazy for the Go-Go's musical. That fact is really surprising.
It is. Now, it would be unfair for me to sabotage you and say, do you feel extra responsibility about that?
Good follow-up.
I'm not going to do that. But I'm wondering if you think the addition of a woman's voice to this is possibly going to add a different flavor to what this party will ultimately be that we get to experience on the stage.
I mean, yeah, I guess I would just expand that out, as you just said, about the room of artists that have been gathered to make this thing. And that I am one of a body that wasn't represented in the history of the show on the creative team. And that there are a lot of artists in our company who, as you said, are not from a theater background necessarily, and are coming with their own backgrounds and histories and all of that. And I think that that is something that we're interested in artistically anyway, kind of those collisions of creativity when people are coming to something from all different disciplines, because inherently that as a part of the creative team creates a world that does that for the audience, just by nature of who's in the room. And as Sam said, there's something about the music that feels wild and free and joyful and raucous. And the fact that that music was created and performed by women is also fucking awesome. Right? That like that the women's band jukebox musical is the Go-Go's music feels really exciting. And I think very intentional as we're thinking about the music for this show, that like the band will be all women identifying humans. And that I think it also goes through how we're approaching the characters, both playing at and subverting where gender was explored, how it is explored in like tropes, but also in the original musical, and having fun with bending those things.
Well, it's interesting because I found an interview that Belinda Carlisle gave in 2016 to Rolling Stone. And she said, we were feminist only in the way that we never really compromised our image. Everything we did was totally authentic, and we did it on our own terms. So in that way, we were feminist, but for us, the music was genderless. It sounds like she's describing this music.
Linda.
I think we really fly the flag of Belinda's words in this room. And it is, I think part of the power that we're trying to build is about the collective.
Yeah.
And that is both about process, but it's also about the show itself and the story that we're telling. And I mean, we say this about so many things, but it's like, what if we just did it?
Right.
Like, what if we actually just did it? And like, when you see the show and when you see the people on it, there's a lot of folks on the design team who are representing bodies that are not often represented in a musical theater process.
That's right.
And the 8 performers we have are the 8 performers we have. And there's a lot of different things happening at once.
Right.
And the thing we're thinking about is doing a good show.
Right.
I mean, I can't speak to the empowered women part of it, but I can speak to the collective force of it.
Right. Right.
Interesting, because when I interview people, directors, writers, whether it's in theater or film, particularly with directors, there's always this idea of the show you're going to make, and then there's the show that you end up making. And I'm wondering what discoveries the two of you have made from the idea part of this to now being, neck deep in rehearsals.
Oh, it's such a good question.
Yeah.
Woo. I mean, I think at the heart of the show we have wanted to make from the earliest seed of this idea, the goal has been to create something unique for the performers and artists that we gather. And we've said that again and again in talking to folks about casting. We want to showcase the 8, that it is as wild and unique and talented and powerful and fully embodied as those humans are that are assembled. And so I feel like that dream has been kind of like, it has been a dream, a foggy dream. And now that we're in the room with the artists we have, I feel like we're constantly on our toes for how we really shape this to them. So it is 8, we made a joke in the first week that it's like the Avengers, like the queer Avengers. How do we make sure that all 8 and that the humans we have gathered feel able to be their fullest selves in a way that can invite audience members to do the same? So the dream, I think, has always been that.
Mhm.
And then being flexible and nimble enough to say like, wow, that's not at all what we thought it was going to be. Yes. What are we gonna do now? Go grab a hula hoop? Like, let's try it. Let's try it. I don't know, let's try it.
I would assume it's the classic improv instruction. It's yes and, not yes but.
It's yes and plus 6 inner tubes plus a hula hoop plus Leah Delaria and sparkly Converse. Like, it's all of those things all the time.
Yeah.
And I think the thing you said about the audience is really important. Like, we've been really firm about this being customized to a group of performers who are singular. There's not a single person in this cast who I would ever say like, oh yeah, they kind of remind me of this person that I've worked with. It is Unicorn City. And when you are in the space tomorrow, which is so exciting, you'll see that we've created a space that architecturally makes for a different show experience for every audience member. Not everybody will have the exact same show. Everybody, I hope, should feel like they got a little treat. I saw something that nobody else saw. I'm going to take that away for myself. And so it's customized for the performers, and it's also kind of customized for the audience, which we're at the beginning of learning about.
Well, I've already requested standing seats, not sitting seats.
Yes!
We applaud you!
It's made for you, Craig.
I'm not going to be shy about that. I know we only have a few more minutes because you have to get back to rehearsal, but I do want to ask you about necessity being the mother of invention. This show had 33 producers when it went to New York, and it was capitalized at $14.5 million. Now, so this is the Pasadena Playhouse. I'm going to assume that this production doesn't have or need 33 producers and $14.5 million to get made. So what do you hope that other producers and directors, of musicals could learn about the approach that you're taking with this version of Head Over Heels?
You want to start?
Well, I think it scares me to think about what other producers and directors can learn. But I think for us, this thing and everything it's human powered. The thing and that, I think that's always been true for us, but like the thing we've been missing the most is bodies, is like living, breathing humans. So nothing is going to be more spectacular than the humans. And that's true for the performers, and that's true for the audience. So I mean, I think it's so funny to hear those numbers, because like at no point have I thought like, oh, if only we could have automation. Like, that's just not what this is about. It's about the people. And I think we've said at every turn in ways that I think it sometimes surprised our collaborators, like, no, when we say it can be made out of toilet paper, we mean actual toilet paper. We don't mean like fine artisan crafted seamstress toilet paper. Like, and that's not a concept. That's just like the humans are the engine. Would you agree?
Yeah, and yes, and yes, and to just take a moment to shout out the Pasadena Playhouse, because I really feel like the other thing to learn is how an institution can support big, risky ideas in a moment of time where a lot of institutions are contracting, understandably so, but like really waiting to see what will happen. And I guess that is something that feels unusual in this moment of we're going to invite people back with the most joyous party possible. We're going to go big and do a musical as our first show back. And we trust that when you say toilet paper, okay, we're going to go on the journey with you. And that is a lot of trust from a building.
And I think what's fair to share that at no point in this process has the Pasadena Playhouse been like, okay, but can you do it for cheap? And in fact, we've reduced the cast to 8 people, which was a choice from us about storytelling. Which I think the story goes that institutions are like, can you do it with 3?
Right.
That just isn't the conversation. There has been a feeling of abundance, even if what we actually have is like people and Mylar and glue guns. Like that's what we're doing.
Well, the abundance is going to come from the heart. That's where the abundance is going to come from. And it reminds me of something, Sam, that you have on your Instagram page. I do my research. I look at this shit.
I mean,
on one of your post-its, you have deep thinking is all about moving things into memory so we can create connections and associations between them. That sounds to me like you're living up to that philosophy for what you're presenting in Head Over Heels.
We're trying to. I take that very seriously.
I'm not trying to embarrass you by having pointed out something on your Instagram. You look a bit chagrined.
No, it's public. I did it. I put it out there. It's very, and also I would move to put something like that on my Instagram because I believe in it so much. I'm not a big Instagrammer. So like, I will see that and I will say, yeah. And that's a big ask. Like, that's a really big thing to live up to. And it requires rigor, which we're in the middle of right now.
Right. You
can't just snap your fingers and say we created those connections.
Right. You mean this isn't Vicky and Judy? You can't just put on a show?
It's human work. It's
right.
And you both sound like you're having a good time. And I hope that we all get to experience the party you're describing because it sounds like a blast.
Oh, we can't wait to have you and to welcome you back.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm really looking forward to tomorrow where I get a little taste of what this is all going to be.
Woo!
Yay!
Thank you so much for taking half an hour out of your busy, rehearsal schedule to do this. I really enjoyed it.